thought I'd do a little bit of experimenting today. So I'm just going to use these cotton buds. So I think some people call them Q-tips. But it's on the back of a comment I had on YouTube where the person mentioned that they use these for painting flowers. And it was on the back of the credit card painting I did a couple of weeks ago. I'm just going to paint on the back of an old failed painting. It's a piece of Archie's, £140, cold press. I'll use a mist bottle as well. But it was a comment, it was Karen on YouTube commented that she uses cotton buds for painting flowers. And got me thinking, I've used them for oil painting, for blending, but never thought of using them for watercolour. So I thought I'd have a bit of an experiment, see what happens. I'm just going to wet the paper now and just quickly run my fingers over it just to knock out any large drips. It's the first time I've used these for painting as well, so it's either going to be a success or a complete disaster. Hopefully be somewhere in between. I've got some magenta on the palette. I'm just picking some of that up now. I've also got some ultramarine, raw sienna and perylene green. And so I'm just going to drop the paint just into the wet on the paper there. And already feels like I think I'm going to use the cotton buds just kind of like a brush, I suppose. Albeit quite a blunt brush, so I'm expecting I'm not going to be able to get any detail with these. So it's just going to be finding the shapes and working with whatever emerges, really. And so I'm going to paint quite loose and just find overall shapes. And I may or may not come back in with a brush when it's dry. But I'll just wait and see what happens, really. So first impressions, I quite like the way the paint's behaving on the cotton. It's definitely interesting. It's some nice soft shapes. I'll give that a little bit more of a spray, maybe get a few little runs happening. And I think, as always, when I do this kind of sort of semi-abstract flower paintings, really, it's going to create a little bit of a mess, really, before it all comes together. But you have to stick with it and just have a little bit of faith that something's going to emerge. And so hopefully by the end of it, I'll have like a vase of roses. And so more magenta, more raw sienna. And now the whole time just laying a little bit of paint in and then taking a little step back and having a look, seeing where else I need to go. I just want to find a balanced shape, really, that I can turn into a vase of flowers. I'll just flip the cotton bud round and just pick up a little bit of pure raw sienna. I'll just flip it backwards and forwards now between the two sides. I'll just pick up a fresh one and just pick up a little bit of that ultramarine. And I'll mix that in with some of the magenta. So I've created a little bit of a shadow colour now. I can just start adding that in around and letting it run together. It's always quite nice experimenting with different tools other than brushes. It's always surprising some of the marks you can make, and it's sort of quite freeing really to use tools that you can't make any detailed marks with them, and so you just have to really concentrate on finding nice shapes. I'm just looking at that on the left hand side now, it's starting to run down quite a bit, but it might make an interesting effect. Just pick up a little bit more, just neat magenta now. And now a little bit more raw sienna. I mean, at the moment it looks like a little bit of a mess, but I can see that the shapes will start to emerge. And so I'll go for quite a large flower up the top here. And so really at this stage it's kind of just mapping out an overall shape. I'll give that another little spritz. And now just grabbed a little bit of paper towel. I think that shape on the left is kind of run together a little bit too much, so I'll just lift a little bit out of that. And just so I can have I need some highlights left at the end that I can work with. I'm thinking now maybe Bockingford, something like that would have been better for this rather than the Arches paper. The water sits on top of it, so I'm getting quite a lot of runs, but I'm still confident we should get something at the end of this. And so I'm just going to grab a little bit of that Perylene green now, mix a little bit of raw sienna into it. That makes quite a nice soft green colour. And now I can start filling in some of the gaps in between the flower shapes that I've laid down. And so it's going to create a little bit of foliage. And lay some darker Perylene green in there. And now it's kind of like negative painting. I have to think of the shapes of the flowers that I want to leave behind and lay the darks in around that. So a little bit more green, a little bit more raw sienna. And I'll just bring a few leaves out. And just hit that with a little bit of darker paint. And a few little stalks I can start to bring out now. And adding darker areas just kind of around the outside, it just helps to frame the lighter flower shapes. And then that hopefully make them stand out a little bit better. I think I'm going to have the light coming in from the right hand side, so the green over to the right will be lighter and a little bit darker over on the left. Just going to go back into that blue and now try and find a shape of a vase, or just very loosely lay it in at the moment. I'll just grab a little bit more green, magenta and raw sienna. And this is all wet, so this vase shape should kind of run together with everything else. And I don't want it to be too prominent anyway in the finished painting. It's just kind of like there in the background really. And then bring out a little bit of a suggestion of a shadow on the left, and just bring it down a little bit as well, so it's like a reflection in the table. And just a little bit of dark across the bottom there. And a few little marks just to kind of balance the overall shape of the painting out. I just picked up some more green, more raw sienna. And now I can just add a few more little leaves and little bits of foliage. So I mean, using these cotton buds is kind of like a cross between drawing and painting in a way, I suppose. But it's quite interesting. It's making marks that I've never really made before, so it's a nice exercise. And I'm using the Perylene green pretty much neat now, and it's almost black. If you're going to do this kind of painting yourself, you don't have to stick to the colours that I'm using. You can use anything that you've got lying around really. But I like to use essentially a red, a yellow and a blue. And because it's usually quite difficult to mix, it's quite handy to have some kind of a green. I wouldn't use a sap green or definitely not a viridian. Perylene green's quite nice because it's so dark, and then it mixes very nicely with raw sienna. But that said, anything you've got lying around really, just experiment with the colours that you've got. So I'm just laying a few dark shapes around the outside of the flowers and in the middle area. And just trying to find the overall shapes in there, and just surround them with some darks, and that should hopefully make the lights pop a bit more. Now it's definitely starting to take shape. Just get a few more darks in around the outside of the flowers. I'm actually quite liking the very soft edges I'm getting by using the cotton. It's quite a nice effect. I just lay a little bit of dark just at the bottom of that vase as well. Maybe that's a little suggestion that there's some of the flower stalks inside the vase. But I think I've gone as far as I can at the moment, so I'll dry it off and then I'll have a look. Okay, I'm just going to use a rigger brush now, and it's dried very soft, so I think I need a few hard edges just to really outline what's going on. And so I'll start in the middle of the flowers, and like I said at the start, I was thinking a vase of roses anyway, so roses have quite a nice sort of spiral pattern in the way they grow and the way they form, so I'll just try and suggest some of that. But still working very loosely, because everything is so loose already. You don't want to start adding too much detail at this stage. So it's still keeping everything on the abstract side. So I'm just adding a few harder edges really, just to pull everything together. So again, there's another little flower down there. And just picking out that sort of very loose spiral type shape that you get with a rose. And just looking at those little light areas that I blotted out with the paper towel, and I can use that as the centre of the flower. I mean, it's quite a nice way to paint like this really, not having any total set plan, not using any reference photo at all. And just looking at what happens on the paper and just working with the shapes that form, making decisions. I mean, obviously I've painted this kind of thing quite a few times, so I've got a rough idea what's going to happen. And usually with a plastic card or a brush. And I'll just strengthen some of the shape in the vase there. And then hopefully just a few little marks will look like there's some stalks in there, refracting through the water. And so really I'm just looking at the shapes that I've got and just adding a few hard edges just to make it all read a little bit better. Okay, there's a nice big flower there, I think. And so just thinking about the shape of the petals on a rose and the way they kind of overlap. Without being too literal about it. Now I'll go back into some of that dark green And very simply, but still just using it to outline the shape of the flower on the inside. And just adding a little bit of definition to some of the leaves. But I don't want to completely cover up the soft marks that I made with the cotton buds. It's nice to leave a lot of that blurred kind of look behind. And I'm thinking these shapes kind of look like unopened buds. So I'll try and work with that shape. And so very tightly folded petals. And then again, just strengthening the shape by adding the darks around. And just flick out a few little leaves and stalks. So I think we're coming to the end now pretty much. I'm just going to add a few more little hard dark edges. Just stand back and look at the overall shape and just try and make sure that everything's balanced. Just a couple more little dark marks here and there. And kind of make sure everything's connected and nothing's standing out too much on its own. And a few little dry brush marks as well. But I'm just stood back, just had a look. I think you don't want to overwork it, so I'll leave it as it is. Okay, that's a very fun little exercise there using cotton buds. Thanks to Karen on YouTube for the suggestion, or the comment really, that just got my imagination going. It's always nice to experiment with different things. If you're going to have a go at this, let me know how you get on and tag me on Instagram, Facebook, and wherever you post your paintings, and I'd like to see how you got on with it. Check me out on Patreon as well if you haven't already. I've got lots of exclusive videos over there that aren't on YouTube, so do check that out. And I'll be back again next week with another video, so have a great week and I'll see you in the next one.